Welcome to Ampyre Sessions, where discovery meets rebellion. This is the show that takes you on a journey through the world of music, the riffs, the legends, the hidden stories, and the lessons that fuel creativity. Here we break down the craft, the culture, and the chaos of sound, making it raw and extremely unforgettable. Whether you're a musician, a fan, or you're just really hungry for knowledge, Ampyre is your backstage pass to the rebellion of audio. So plug in, turn up. This is Ampyre Sessions. Welcome back. I am your host, Dustin, and we are on episode 2 at this point. We made 2 episodes already. If you haven't checked those out, please go on to Spotify or Apple Podcasts. We are going to do something a little different today, though. We have our normal sessions that we actually sit down here and explain music industry and stuff like that, but let's add in a category that I'm actually really excited to bring you guys. So today, we are going to step into one of the biggest what-ifs questions in modern culture. That is going to be the category. And these categories I have broken down into, I think, 4 different subcategories. But yeah, this one I'm really excited to bring to you because what if is like a segment of an alternate universe if we took something that happened in our universe and then flip-flopped it and see what would happen in an alternate universe. So I'm really excited to bring these categories to you. But yeah, let's dive into this one already. So the category for today is what if Kurt Cobain never died in 1994? Okay, that's one of the biggest things in music history, actually, with Nirvana. Was Kurt Cobain's death tragically happened in the mid 90s. So yeah, that's what we're going to break down today. And yeah, let's jump into it. What if he survived? What if he recovered? What if he kept creating music? What would Nirvana look like today? And what would the entire music landscape look like if he was still alive today? This isn't about rewriting a tragedy by any means. Kurt Cobain's death was very tragic to the music industry and just in general. But yes, it's not about rewriting a tragedy. This is just shower thoughts, so to speak. What would happen if he was still alive? But yeah, it's about exploring the ripple effects of a world where one of the most influential artists of the 90s kept going. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and open this portal. We're going to start at the point of divergence, okay? So, every alternate universe, it starts with a single moment, right? But in this timeline, Kurt Cobain reaches a breaking point in 1994, which he did. In our current universe, he did in 1994. But instead of tragedy, he gets help, okay? So a friend intervenes, or a bandmate steps in, or a doctor recognizes the signs, but something within the universe shifts, and miraculously, Kurt survives. Okay, that is a huge point right there. He enters treatment. He steps away from the spotlight, which I think anyone with an ounce of fame, if they went through a tragic moment like that, would step away from the spotlight and be the only smart thing to do. But he begins a long, brutal, necessary process of healing. So this is the moment where the universe decides to split. But I guess what we should also do is look into the band itself. In case you don't know, Nirvana is a American rock band that was formed in Washington in 1987. It was founded by none other than Kurt Cobain, but then also the bass guitarist Chris Novoselic. The band went on to succession through many drummers, notably Chad Channing, but then also David Grohl in 1990. I assume knows who Dave Grohl is. He is the frontman for Foo Fighters, what was the drummer for Nirvana. A very talented human being. And I know this is a touchy situation because people like to poke Dave Grohl about Nirvana and Kurt Cobain, but this no way in shape or form is poking at Dave Grohl or Kurt. This is just literally shower thoughts on what would have happened if Kurt did survive. But anywho, giving you the backstory, continuing, Nirvana had success popularized in the alternate rock scene, and they were often referenced as a figurehead band of Generation X. Music maintains a popular following and continues to be a rock influencing culture. I know many rock stations that are in my local area that still do play a few Nirvana songs. So it's very cool to see that 90s are still alive and well and kicking. So I do enjoy that. But that's a little backstory on Nirvana. If you never heard of them, I would highly recommend. They're some very talented musicians. And Kurt's voice does need to live on throughout life. So 100%. If you never heard of them, please go to YouTube or wherever you find your favorite music. And look them up. But yeah, the next section is the immediate aftermath. So in our timeline, Nirvana ended abruptly, right? So after Kurt's death, Nirvana kind of just went, kaplow, and it's good. But in this alternate universe, the band goes on a hiatus. They don't break up, which is good to see. But the media does start to have frenzy, which in our current timeline they also did. But then also in this timeline, they are also frenzying. The world reacts with shock, which again they did in our current reality. But then relief comes. Curiosity comes to why. And fans, diehard fans of that nature, have an obsession with what would have happened. But in this alternate reality, Kurt becomes a symbol of survival instead of tragedy. The band does like to shift dynamics. Dave Grohl and Chris Novoselic give Kurt his space. They support him privately, which if I went through a strategy like that and ended up surviving, I would want someone to support me privately as well and not go public with it. But yeah, they don't push for a return, which is really smart. This is where we can all talk about in the music industry the emotional weight that comes with being a very talented artist. Some of your most emotional songs and stuff like that, I would imagine, have some demon behind it. They really do. But yeah, the pressure of fame also we can talk about here. Especially, I mean, it's a little different in the 90s than it was in like 2010s to 2020s, that decade, because that decade specifically, 2010s to 2020s, was really pressure focused on artists. When you think about it, you had the rise of streaming come out during that time period and really become to put a burden on the music industry and the artist being a productive point. So yeah, there's a lot of pressure of fame, and then the fragility of artists in the spotlight. At the end of the day, people sometimes bypass it, like your favorite artists and stuff like that, and you don't really think about it. It's like, they're human, just like me, just like you, just like everyone else. We're all humans at the end of the day, and everyone has a fragile moment in life, and we just need to be there for each other. But yeah, we move on to Nirvana's return. So in this alternate universe, Nirvana does return in 1997, okay? But it looks like they go until 1999. After a few years of recovery, Kurt returns to music, but not in the same way, okay? I'd imagine after a traumatic experience, you're not going to be the same person. Something's going to change about you, and that's just how it is. But yeah, the sound evolves. Nirvana's comeback album is more experimental. Okay. I already touched on it, but traumatic experience like that, I would assume someone is trying to shift how their sound is. But just like my previous episode, episode 1 was about how a musician finds their signature sound. Even if you're a well-established musician, there's nothing that states that you can't change the sound, especially if you're multi-talented. But yeah, more experimental tones to this album, which I would expect coming after a situation like that. You have more melodic tones. You have less explosiveness, which I think is really key, because when you think of Nirvana, it's really in your face, right? So less explosive tones on their comeback album. That would put fans at a moment where you're just at a standstill, I feel, because it's not the same. But more introspective as well. You're trying to find out who you are in that point. So you're going through a process of change. So we can think about this album as having acoustic textures, okay? Which is really, really, really cool to see acoustic textures on this new album. It's kind of different. Darker harmonies, you could expect that. It has electronic influences. A more mature, reflective Kurt makes sense as well, right? You can describe the vibe of their music through this album as haunting. I thought that was very interesting. But yeah, it's an atmospheric type of vibe, but it's also raw, but it's also controlled. So the genre, if you wanted to put a genre on this album, it could be a blend of grunge, art rock, and alternative. Okay. The cultural impact from Nirvana's newest album in this alternate universe becomes a generational moment. Yeah. Kurt becomes a symbol for survival, reinvention, and vulnerability. So at this point, you can talk the late 90s alternative scene about just around Nirvana's return. which is also key to the influence of future bands. Yeah. The next part we can go to is the ripple effect on music, and specifically music history. So this really is the heart of this episode right here. So if you pay attention to any point during this episode, it has to be right here. So this is the biggest what ifs that have consequences. So you look at the first one, the rise of post-grunge changes. So post-grunge is a genre. Without Nirvana's sudden end, post-grunge doesn't dominate the same way. Okay? You had during that era too, post Kurt Cobain, post Nirvana, you had a bunch of quote unquote Nirvana clones that decided to come out. Everyone has cover bands, but these clones, these clone bands, as I like to call them, they really formed and tried to just copy. Yeah, they could have been an influence, but they really just tried to copy the music and not make it their own. But they never really fully take over at that point, and the genre evolves more organically instead of feeling forced like it did in our current day and age, or our current universe. But yeah, that's the first one, post-grunge changes. The second one that I find really interesting on this one is Dave Grohl's path changes. In this universe, the Foo Fighters still exist, and they coexist with Nirvana, which is very key because the next point that I make really screams coexistence within the two bands. So Grohl becomes a dual band legend. In case you don't know, artists and musicians don't have to stick to just one band if they don't want to. They can take on multiple projects. One big example that I could think of in the metal industry is Corey Taylor. Corey Taylor is the frontman for Slipknot, but also broke away at the same point to take on a different project where he's the frontman for, I believe it was Stone Sour. He had multiple projects that he was working on at one time. So becoming a dual band legend, I mean, Foo Fighters in their own right are legendary rock band. So you still continue that process and that idea, but then also coexist with being in a legendary band in its own right, Nirvana. Come on, you go down in history as probably one of the best, if not the best, multi-talented musicians out there. Another cool piece from this, the ripple effect on music history, because Nirvana was still around, the 2000s rock revival looks different. I touched a point on this earlier, but bands influenced by Nirvana from alt rock to emo to indie during that time frame evolved differently. Again, even it takes effect on the 2000s era as well for rock. Like, does your favorite band still become a thing? Are they still inspired the same ways? The sound, the tone, still the same that you're used to hearing nowadays? Just something cool to think about. And then number 4, mental health in music shifts. I think either way, in a day like in a day and age like today, even in our normal reality, mental health in music should be huge. Just because recently we've lost a bunch of fantastic artists due to mental health issues. So I definitely think this one is key for a ripple effect on music, not only in this alternate universe, but in ours as well. It's very key. So Kurt becomes a public advocate for addiction recovery, mental health awareness, and artist well-being. Now, this changes the conversation in the industry years later. Number 5, the 27 Club Mythology Weekends. Kurt's survival breaks the pattern. It becomes a story of hope instead of inevitability. It shows you a cultural weight that just in Kurt Cobain's own right, let alone Nirvana's music at the time too, really, really goes into depth. Like it creates a big crack in the sky, if you will. And moving on, Kurt Cobain in the 2000s. So you get like a creative cinematic version of Kurt. So the collaborations in this universe Kurt works with, be kind of interesting to see some of the names that are on here that he would work with. But yeah, Tom York, Trent Reznor, PJ Harvey, early era Jack White, a young Billy Joe Armstrong, and later even artists like St. Vincent and Tommy Impala. Not really pop collaborations with these artists, but experimental, boundary pushing ones. So I could put it as similar as when Aerosmith was getting their groove back after the Toxic Twins broke up. Kind of similar tone here when Aerosmith had a little run with Run DMC to get their groove back. So It's, so to speak, sort of a similar thing. It's not really collaborations with being a poppy tone, but yeah, just boundary pushing music. The activism, Kurt becomes outspoken about corporate control of music, which we'll get to a little bit later when he really hit the next era, so to speak. Artist exploitation, mental health, we already touched on, but he still becomes the quite activist. For those categories, the sound, his music evolves, which kind of touched point on earlier with the debut album after he survived what he went through. But yeah, his music evolves into art rock, ambient grunge, acoustic driven introspection. Really heavy on the acoustic tones, it seems like, with his later music, and then occasional explosive returns with heavy distortion. So it looks like he's trying to, at that point, fight his demons a little bit and then get it out. But yeah, Kurt becomes a Bowie-like figure, constantly reinventing. And whoever doesn't know who Bowie is, David Bowie is definitely an artist that reinvented himself multiple times. So yeah. The modern era. This is one we really find as stress. It's the 2010s to 2020s. So in this alternate universe, Kurt Cobain is still alive today, but he's older, he's wiser, and he's still creating his music. His role in modern music, he becomes a mentor, a collaborator, which we went through the previous artists on who he might collaborate with, and then a cultural elder, a voice of authenticity in a digital world. I find that really expressive, especially when 2010s to 2020s, man, really needed somebody to really be authentic during that time frame. His influences on streaming culture. Kurt pushes back against algorithmic music and the pressure to produce constant content. That key point that I just raised was described that era of music 100%. 2010s to 2020s, you had the rise of streaming. You had the rise of pop-up studios. Like before then, I don't even think you could walk into somebody's house or basement and start recording a session. You still had to go to a physical studio and put it down a deposit for your time frame and stuff of that nature just to even record something. Champions artistic freedom, slow creation, and authentic expression. So Nirvana today, the band releases music sporadically, not frequently, but intentionally. Each release becomes a cultural event, okay? What I could kind of compare that to is bands that you really don't see on a constant, consistent basis. A band like U2 or bands like Kiss, things like that. They release music sporadically, but not frequently, and everything has to have something from it. So, in my opinion, Nirvana, if they were still alive in today's day and age, and today's generation, the music I feel would have to come from a world event or political event or something of that nature to really get the spark and uprise. Because when you listen to Nirvana in the early 90s, man, that's what it was about. It's fun, great music to listen to, but it had a message. Definitely did. You can really paint a vivid picture of what 2025 Nirvana album feels like from everything that I've explained. But yeah, so now I just kind of go into the why. So why I made this episode. So why this alternate universe matters to begin with. This episode isn't about rewriting history. I want to make that very clear. I respect Kurt Cobain. I respect Nirvana. I respect Dave Grohl. No, none of this was meant to be any type of bashing, harmful, or non-negativity. It was just a cool episode to think of what that person could have had an impact on post what happened if they would have survived. You know, no harm was meant by creating this by any means necessary. It's one episode that's about exploring the impact of one artist, one voice, and on an entire generation. Kurt's real story, at the end of the day, we can all agree it's tragic. It is very tragic. But imagine a world where he survived reminds us of the importance of mental health. In the medical industry, we don't know that much about mental health. Like everyone's built differently, chemically different, and we don't know much about like mental health disorders. So it's really one of the unexplored places of the medical industry that I wish people would understand a little bit more and have a little more patience with, because it is a huge importance on today's day and age. 100% it is. Another thing that he reminds us is the pressure that artists face. We all take a look at these artists and we think it's like, oh, well, I love listening to them, and that's all they are to me, is just my escape. That's not how music should be. I mean, we're all human beings at the end of the day. Treat everyone with respect. Like, you don't know what that other person's going through. Heck, you don't know what that artist is going through. But we also look at the fragility of creative brilliance and how easily fractured something can be. And what I mean by that is, during this episode, we went through and it started out as an art rock tone, or post grunge is what Nirvana was, but they switched into a more acoustic melodies and dark, deeper tones instead of the rock your face off type. So it really shows the fragility of creative brilliance just based off something tragic like this. It also showed the ripple effect one person can have on a culture. It trickles down, because you don't know what happens if he does survive this. It really shows, like, are some of your bands that are life-changing now, are they still around? Are they still making music? Do they sound the same? Do you even become a fan of that because they sound different? It's really curious on what possibly the culture and the mindset could change just based off this one person still being here. It reminds us behind every legend is a human being who deserve more time on this earth. And it's a sad, tragic story of what happened with Kurt Cobain. But yeah, I'm happy to bring this episode because it is something that we need to talk about. It is not only the importance of mental health, but it's also something that we need to talk about, is the importance of being there for each other, and also just having a fun episode that I can bring you that's just something to think about. Shower thoughts, as I got told, is what this was about. It is the universe that we will never know, unfortunately. If you like this episode, we will produce more What If episodes. If you could, go to www.ampyresessions.com. So on the homepage, I have 3 featured items. This month, from the start of January to the end of January, there's 3 items that are featured items on the homepage. They will only be here for 1 month. I'm going to do this every month. I'm going to create custom merch based off of one cool idea that I had about episodes. And yeah, we're going to create, it could be about a holiday, it could be about an episode, it doesn't matter, but we'll create featured items with our logo on it. And yeah, we'll get you guys those deals. Also, if you end up just browsing around the website, there is something that we have, is our Ampyre Backstage Pass. From that point, you get full video episodes is what I offer. With those, it's $9.99 a month or $100 annually per year. You do save $20 if you do sign up for the annual. Please give that a go. Also, with those backstage passes, you do get a promo code on merchandise where you do get a bigger percentage off. That promo code is only available to people that are members of the Backstage Pass for Ampyre Sessions. So please like, share, subscribe, follow, whatever you can do would help me out completely. This has been Ampyre Sessions, exploring an alternate universe where Kurt Cobain lived, healed, and kept creating. We'll never know the world would sound like without him, but imagining it helps us appreciate the impact that he did have on the music industry, the music that he left behind, and the conversations that we are still having to this day. If you want more What If episodes, or if you want to vote for the next alternate universe episode, please don't be afraid to shout out with that contact page on my website as well. Join the Ampyre Sessions Backstage Pass and help shape the future of our show. You have been listening to Ampyre Sessions, where discovery, it meets rebellion. The journey doesn't stop here. Keep exploring, keep creating, keep the fire alive. Until next time, stay loud, stay bold, but never fade into the noise. This was Ampyre Sessions.